In fact, yeah. In fact, my worry was I was going to collapse or something in class. So that's the reason why I propose that we have a virtual session. I was almost tempted to reschedule, class, but sadly we don't have the luxury of rescheduling classes. All right. So a few announcements. We, I think I'd mentioned in yesterday's class that we were meant to have our proposal presentation start tomorrow, but I'd much rather we finish off our discussion of exercise number 8 tomorrow, which I think we should be able to, because the only bit that's remaining is the discussion on sampling. Now, what I would instead like to suggest is, and I'm just going to hope here that a couple of options here. What I'm suggesting is that we instead do this beginning Wednesday, so we're going to have a normal class tomorrow morning. I am coming for class. I will be fit enough for class. But however, on Wednesday, what I would want us to do is to, I don't want to rely on the two course representatives to let me know if, to just confirm with the others, your availability beginning 8 all the way up to 13 hours. I can't afford to miss my 13 hours meeting. So I'm going to suggest that. Now, turns out the way we are going to do this is such that, because what we've noticed is that the questions that we tend to ask, right, if you remember the previous presentations, are more or less the same. So the people that would find themselves presenting towards the end will typically have an unfair advantage. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of things here. We're going to at the very beginning, we'll only allow individuals that are supposed to be presenting to be available. Once we process the very first couple of groups, those people would be free to stick around, and you're encouraged to stick around so that you listen to the feedback. However, those groups that would not yet have presented will not be allowed to be in the venue that we'll be using for presentations, right? So that's a couple of things here. Now, because we anticipate that there's going to be a bit of an issue with the venue, tentatively we are scheduling presentations to take place in the School of Education conference room, which is on the 5th floor. It's on the same floor as the office I normally work from. Yeah, so today, part of today and tomorrow, I guess, mostly tomorrow, will give us an opportunity to have people specify when exactly during this slot they're going to be available, because these are supposed to be 10-minute long slots. So you'll be given 10 minutes to do your presentations, like we said. However, we are also going to allocate some 5 minutes for the Q&A session. Now, because there's 5 minutes for Q&A session here, and because we have quite a number of groups here, in essence, actually, if we look at the total number of groups that we have here, I'm just going to open them up so that this is informed by data. We have roughly, I guess, we have a total of, yes, it's bad. We have a total of if I can just quickly check this. Last time I checked, we had a total of 6 groups, but could be slightly more. Let's just see if we can confirm this, clarify this. Okay, just use this then. Yeah, I think we have a total of about 26 groups, really, to be honest. And so what we are likely going to be faced with is a situation where we need, so there we go. Just a group 1 up to somewhere around 26. Some of them are empty here, if you notice. So it's about 26 groups, right? Now, because we have 26 groups, each group is going to be given 15 minutes, right? 10 minutes for presentations and then 5 minutes for Q&A. So we're looking at 390 minutes, which is about 6 hours. In fact, we're going to dumb it down here. Instead of, I want us to dumb it down. Instead of 5 minutes for Q&A, maybe 3 minutes for Q&A, so that we have 2 minutes actually, so that we have like 12 minutes or something. I would want us to conclude this within 5 hours. It's the reason why, right? A minute or two. It's the reason why. It's the reason why I'm suggesting that we start this on Wednesday itself at 8 promptly, so that by somewhere around 13 hours we would have finalized everything, be done. It should give us quite a bit of time to do this, you know, because it's 5 minutes by 0.2 times 6, 5 hours and 12 minutes in essence, you know. So there's that, right? Just take note of the fact that these proposal presentations are taking place day after tomorrow, and I will. I hope you can hear me just fine. This thing seems to be freezing here. No, Chewe. This is why I'm saying that because we may not follow the groups, because it's possible that there are some people that may have class in between 8 and 13 hours. You understand? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to depend on Ms. Royce and the 2 course reps to help us plan ahead of time. I'm going to send out some document which I will request that you choose as a group which slot you want to present, right? We can't rely on your respective minors because, you know, some groups will comprise of various minors, right? So we're going to try that. In the case that there's a clash, there are a number of clashes in between 8 and 13 hours. What we're going to do is we'll start at 07, right? So by tomorrow midday, by tomorrow at 12, I shall send through the detailed presentation schedule, is it? So that we can iron out issues and stuff. All right. I don't know what you're referring to, Mr. Carlos. You're saying otherwise it would be difficult. I don't know what that is. I don't think I understand where that comment is coming from. Do you want to unmute your microphone and tell us what exactly you're trying to put across?
Yeah. So I was saying that it will be difficult. Reason being, maybe you may find that because in my group where I am, we have got people who have 3 different minors. So you may find that maybe you put it like we select that we're going to present on 11 hours, and then you find that one of your colleagues maybe is going to have a class, and then you put it
No, but
maybe
no one has class. No
of
one has class at 11. The example, I know it's just an example. Nobody's going to have class at 11 because we're supposed to be having 2034. This is the reason why I'm saying that. One of the things we're going to explore doing is to start earlier, right? At 07, because we know nobody has class at 07 hours. Because nobody has class at 07, we'll be able to process quite a number of groups between 7 and 8, right? And we'll be able to process a number of groups between 11 and 12, because that's a 2034 slot. So it's a reason why I'm actually suggesting that we do this on Wednesday because it will give us most of tomorrow to figure out what configuration is going to work best. And I'm pretty sure that most of you don't have class between 8 and 9 as well. So already we would have like 2 hours between 7 and 9, right, to do this. You know, and then an extra hour between 11 and 12. So we will give you an opportunity to indicate to us, right, to say, you know, our group has this person who is not going to be available during this slot, so that we shuffle you around accordingly. Anyways, but I'll send out communication about this. Today, I would love for us to continue on, unless if there are questions about proposal, presentations, and all that. But, you know, today, if you have things that you need to discuss in your respective groups, please do today, so that tomorrow at 7 during class, you can raise these concerns, right? And then you can have a more productive discussion. You want to discuss these things amongst yourselves in your respective groups. And then if you have any burning questions, you can then let us know tomorrow between 7 and 8. We have class. At the very beginning, we're going to give you an opportunity. Well, I mean, if you didn't submit on Moodle, then there's a problem there, right? I mean, we'll give you an opportunity to present, but it's going to be tricky here, right? I don't know why, you know, in second year, you still have trouble submitting, especially that you're not submitting alone, right? You're submitting alongside 4 other people. How can you fail to submit? You know, we can pick a random person on the street and they can easily submit content on the Moodle, right? So I'm sitting here and I'm wondering how it is that a person that is in second year that qualified to get to Unza is failing submit content. But anyway, so we'll continue our discussion of lecture series number 8, which is research design. And, you know, I wanted to remind us that we are coming from a background where we've had extensive discussions centered around a broad spectrum of aspects related to research design, right? In particular, we have been using the so-called research onion, is proposed by Sanders et al., right, which categorizes different aspects of your typical research methodology into what you might call layers of an onion or something. So we started off our discussion by, you know, extensively looking at, not extensively really, but looking at the so-called research philosophy, right? And then we then had a discussion of methodological choices. We looked at research strategies, and then we doubled back and had a discussion of approaches to theory development, right? Inductive versus deductive reasoning, in essence. And then recently, we started looking at the very last layer, is it, where we primarily started looking at so-called measurement instruments, right? So in essence, these tools that we use to collect data, right? We had fun looking at how we can take advantage of questionnaires. And then we had an extensive discussion of how we can collect data using interviews. Afterwards, we looked at how we can gather data using observations, right? The average person who's done a research methods course, perhaps at undergraduate level, may not be aware that you can collect data using observations, because usually the 2 primary measurement instruments that are discussed extensively at your level would be interviews, right, and questionnaires, right? After a discussion of observations, we realized that, well, we can actually collect data from quote-unquote secondary data, right? So from data that has already been compiled by other researchers, yeah? Very, very interesting. However, we highlighted the pitfalls associated with collecting or making use of secondary data. Primarily, the major drawback, one of the major drawbacks of secondary data is you do not have control of how the data was collected. Assuming the secondary data you're utilizing was collected by other researchers other than yourself, because it does turn out that you can collect data this year and design a study that will make use of this secondary data that you collected, right? Perhaps to try and address a completely different research question. But anyway, the normal case though is that you would typically be utilizing secondary data gathered and compiled by other researchers, not yourself. Yeah. So quite interesting. And then we had a very mild discussion of other types of measurement instruments. Like, for instance, we realized we can gather data using workshops, right? And I think I gave you an example of I gave you an example of a workshop we conducted with my colleague, our current head of department. We also had a mild discussion of so-called focus group discussions, and we motivated for why you may want to conduct focus group discussions, right? In essence, it's like a group-based interview, if you will, right? Yeah. Now, now that we know how exactly we ought to go about collecting data, the obvious question to ask is, where do we collect this data from, right? How do we select the participants from where we can collect this data from? Yeah. Now, I thought it would be nice to make use of, I think, one of the topics that a group amongst you is working on here. So imagine we are working on a research topic that is related to Wi-Fi access at the University of Zambia, right? Perhaps one of the questions, now I'm not saying that this is a question that the group working on EduROM is supposed to have here, but perhaps one of the questions would be, our research questions would be, how do University of Zambia students utilize the university's EduROM Wi-Fi service, right? Now, if you think about it, right, because we're trying to understand how students make use of the university's EduROM Wi-Fi service, the logical thing for us to do is we would have to ask students, is it, how they use the Wi-Fi service. In other words, we would have to collect data from the students. And you guessed it, one of the potential measurement instruments we could use is a questionnaire. But the question is, is it feasible or is it realistic for us to collect this data from all the 30,000 plus students at UNZA, right? Because, I mean, that's obviously, if you're looking at doing that, that's it. The logical thing to do is you say, we're going to go all out here. We'll approach each and every student and collect data, right? About how they utilize the university's Wi-Fi service. It turns out this is painfully difficult, right? Collecting data from the entire population. In this particular case, it would be difficult for us to collect data from all University of Zambia students. Yeah. Why? Well, at the point when you're collecting data, because there are a lot of people, a lot of students, it's possible that some of the students would be sick, for instance, right? That's like, I know it's a very weird example here, but it's true. At any given point in time, there are probably people at UNZA Clinic admitted as we speak. You understand? There are probably people that are seriously sick and they've decided to withdraw, right? So what I'm trying to hint at here is that typically it's not always feasible for you to collect data from the entire population. In this particular case, this grouping we are calling University of Zambia students would be our population. In certain rare instances, it is possible for you to collect data from the entire population. Like, for instance, if it was feasible for us to collect data from all University of Zambia students, we would be calling that a census, right? The idea behind the census is you're collecting data, you identify a population, right? You identify a population from where, a target population from where you're going to gather data from. And if you collect data from the entire population, it will be called a census. Now, here's the thing. We are not saying that, we're not saying that it's always not possible to do a census. In fact, the government tells us that they do a census, is it? Right? A census of population or something. I don't know about that, but they tell us that they gather data from the entire population in Zambia, right? All the households, in essence. Probably they came and knocked on your room at the University of Zambia, right? If you're in a boarding house, they probably came and knocked in your room, right? And gathered data from you. I don't know, right, about that. maybe not. But here's the thing, right? If you think about a population relative to human beings, you begin to realize that in most instances, it's almost always not feasible to conduct a census. However, I want to remind us that when we're referring to study participants, we're not always referring to human beings, is it? Yeah. I could be interested in conducting a study centered around, because fuel is expensive, just increase the fuel here by 1 quarter where apparently, if I wanted to conduct a study to say, I want to figure out the types of vehicles that are fuel efficient in Zambia when driven on Zambian roads, yeah, so that I'm just wording out here because I'm affected by fuel, I guess, which is why I'm using this example. So I'm going to conduct a study that is centered around understanding fuel consumption of different vehicles on the roads in Lusaka, to be specific, so that a person who would be interested in purchasing a vehicle at some point in the future would have this information handy, and they will know that the Toyota Corolla is fuel efficient when compared to, I don't know if it's like Pajero or something like that, right? What I would do is I would use these vehicles as participants, is it? So maybe it's a longitudinal study where we say we're going to gas them up with a full tank or something, and then they're going to be driven on the same stretch of road, maybe from here to town or something like that, probably at the same speed or something, right? If that's possible, maybe like 60 kilometers per hour or something like that. Now, it is feasible for us, right? If we identify target population, let's say just types of vehicles, like Nissan, Toyota Corolla, I don't know, Pajeros and all those things, BMWs and stuff. It's possible, right, for us to do a census, because it turns out that in this particular case, participants' vehicles are not really affected by these aspects, right, associated with human participants. Like a human participant, forget about being sick here. We discussed ethical consideration, is it? Informed consent. And we realized that for us to be ethical, one of the things we should do is give participants an option to participate in the study, right? It's not mandatory, is it? And because it's not mandatory, it's possible that if you're dealing with human participants, it's possible that a fraction of those human participants may opt out of the study. And so it becomes difficult for you to conduct a census. But anyways, so a survey of the entire population is called a census. And what we're saying is that for most research studies, not all of them, but for most studies, right, to say studies that are conducted, it is impossible for us to conduct a census. It is difficult. Some of the obvious, reasons as to why it is difficult is because of timing constraints, right? It typically takes a significantly longer period of time for you to collect information from the entire population. I'm going to deploy a questionnaire so that I gather information from all UNZA students. Forget about waiting for just a week to gather those responses, right? You're probably going to have to wait months here before you can elicit all the responses from UNZA students. So there's timing constraints. There are financial implications, right? Typically, if you are collecting data at a very large scale, there are implications on expenses, right, that you'll have to incur, for instance. Typically, would be very expensive. And perhaps, one would argue, when you're using questionnaires, maybe it may not be so much of an issue, especially if you're leveraging online questionnaires. But imagine a situation where you have decided to use interviews, right, to gather data. So it becomes costly. And then also, there are actually implications, right, on how practical and how feasible it is, right? In most instances, it's just not feasible or realistic for you to get or to collect data from each and every data point. In this particular example, it would not be feasible for us to reach each and every student at UNZA. That's not possible, right? Some people are out there, right, attending Zamren Week or something like that. Some people are abroad, right, on study abroad programs or something like that. They're only going to be coming back maybe next year or something like that. Anyways, so it's not practical. And so it goes without saying really that because it's not practical, it becomes important for us to systematically devise strategies for selecting participants that would want to participate in our study in the event that the census is not possible, right? So the process of selecting research participants is what we're calling sampling here, right? In essence, you are systematically or logically selecting a subset of your population, right? Or a subset of individuals from your population so that they participate in your study. Rather than saying we are going to sample or going to conduct a census with all 30,000 plus students at UNZA, what you're going to say is we will identify a representative sample, certain keywords here to make sense later on when we look at sample size and all that. We want to select a representative sample of the population. So instead of 30,000, maybe we'll say we're just going to sample 1,000, right? And you notice from our discussion, depending on the sampling technique you're using, it's like you don't care whether, well, you may care here, but this 1,000 could be undergraduate students, could be postgraduate students, it could be first-year students, it could be second-year students, third-year students, and all those things, right? What's key here is you're selecting a representative sample, right? A subset of your population, okay? This diagram is just showcasing some of the things we're going to be discussing very, very soon regarding these different sampling techniques, right? So how do you, if you are saying we're going to collect data from 1,000 out of 30,000 students at UNZA, it's like, how are you selecting these 1,000 participants, right? Now, again, just to rub it in here, it's important that we remind ourselves why it is not feasible for us to conduct a census. Again, it's impractical. There are budgetary constraints, there are timing constraints. For instance, you may need to collect data during a short period of time. This is what you guys are doing, is it? You've been told next week is the last week of classes. So you have until Monday next week to collect data. The timing constraints, right? You do not have the luxury of collecting data from a significantly large target population, is it? All you do is you're collecting from representative sample, right? Now, the image on the right is just showcasing, it's a visual representation of what we're discussing here. We're saying, I guess the oval that is in brown here would be your target population, which comprises of what we're calling elements or cases. So these are entities from where you're collecting data. And what we're saying is that you'd select a subset of that population, right? This is the oval shape that is in light blue here called sample, right? And so you're collecting your data from your sample. Okay. Again, the repeat of why we're trying to justify for why we would want to sample a population, right? It's expensive, you may not have resources, and resources is not just money, is it? There may not be a lot of people around to help you collect data, for instance, timing constraints and all those things. An experimental workload really is like it will be involving, is it? So it's taking a lot of time still. So this whole notion of sampling ensures that the results are within known accuracy, right? That can be computed mathematically. So the idea behind sampling is you're getting a subset, right? A subset which, because it's a subset of the population, it's selected in such a way that mathematically the accuracy of the accuracy of your interpretation of your results, for instance, can easily be generalized to the entire population. It's like if I wanted to find out from you whether I'm effective, I can't collect data from all of you, right? But what I can do is I can sample. I can select some of you, but I sample some of you in such a way that the overall results, the findings, can easily be generalized to the entire population, right? Not 100% accurate, but accurate to a certain degree in essence. So sampling ensures that the results are within a known accuracy. And it turns out that when you're sampling, there are certain things, certain questions that you want to ask yourself in product questions, like what is the population you're working with? University of Zambia students, LIS 2034 students, students in the Department of Library and Information Science, students in the Department of Library and Information Science enrolled in the BARAM program, students in the Department of Library and Information Science enrolled in the Bachelor of ICTs with Education, but minoring in mathematics, right? You're being specific in terms of the population of interest. And then obviously, the other question to ask is, can the entire population be sampled? Now, this entire population is what we're calling the target population, is it? You need to clearly define it to ensure the success of the research project. So the very first thing you do, before you even start thinking about what something technique you're going to have to work with, is you have got to clearly specify what your target population is. So the examples I was giving, is it? Our target population is all first-year students at UNZA, all first-year students in the School of Education, all first-year students in the Department of Library and Information Science. These are all different populations. All primary school pupils in public primary schools in Zambia. Yeah. Anyways, it turns out really that, again, your target population would primarily rely on logic, is it, and judgment. Logic in the sense that if you look at your respective problems, right? We are working towards a research problem that is aimed at trying to understand sanitation at Ridgeway campus. You've got to be smart about this, right? You're not just going to say our target population is all students at Ridgeway campus. It may be difficult for you to gain access to postgraduate students, right? But maybe what you may do is you could say our target population is undergraduate students at Ridgeway campus, for instance. Or you can further streamline this, right? If you have the luxury of doing this, you're going to say our target population is just students at Ridgeway campus in the School of Public Health. You understand this, right? Logic and judgment. It's important here to remember that your target population should be defined. So these boundaries of your target population should be defined in connection with the specific objective that is forcing you to define that target population, or the research question. I want to double back here, right? My research question here: how do UNZA students use university Wi-Fi service? The moment I'm saying how do UNZA students, right, I'm signaling to whoever is going to be looking at my research that my target population is going to be UNZA students, right? I mean, you can probably provide limitations. Let's say we just sampled School of Education students, but in that particular case, things change, is it? Maybe you'd have to be specific. Say it's a case of the School of Education, so that you're restricting your data collection to the School of Education, right? So this is how do UNZA students in the School of Education use university Wi-Fi service or something like that. And the argument there would be that Wi-Fi in the School of Education may be accessed differently when compared to the School of Engineering, for instance. You understand this? Probably in the School of Engineering, you rarely find people, sitting around some certain place which has a stronger Wi-Fi signal or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, so a few things to take into account here. Now, in terms of the definitions associated with sampling here, I thought we'll put it out there. By the way, made a mistake here. Population and target population are one and the same things here. So, but if you notice, we're calling a population or a target population as an entire group of, and notice here, it's not just people always, right? But it's an entire group of people. I like to use the word entities, right? But it's an entire group of people. It could be events or things, right? That you want to draw conclusions about. These things could be mice, lab rats. These things could be trees, is it? There's talk of, we carbon emission and what's this concept they call, I've forgotten the concept they call it here, but trying to incentivize growing of trees here, right? Carbon credits, I don't know if people have heard, those of you that are doing geography have probably heard about carbon credits, right? They're selling carbon now. Human beings never cease to amaze me. You know, carbon credits, is it? So maybe to try and quantify how much money Zambia will make from carbon credits, you say we're going to be counting trees somewhere, right? In Lukusuzi National Park or something like that. The population is trees. You understand? You know, the cars example I gave, the population will be vehicles, right? If we're trying to understand why there are a lot of accidents along the greatest road, you know, maybe we would want to look at the things we're studying here, vehicles, is it? Not people in the vehicles. You understand? So we're defining a population as an entire group of people, events, things that you want to draw conclusions about. So it's an entire group of entities here. And then an element would be an object on which a measurement is taken. So if we are interested in studying vehicles, one vehicle would be an element. If we are interested in studying you, who are enrolled in LIS 2034, right? Miss Hope is an element. Mr. Albert is an element. You understand? Again, target population is the same as population, right? It's like the grouping that you want to collect data on here. And then we're calling a sampling unit here as a non-overlapping collection of elements from the population itself that covers the entire population, right? It's like the subset of the population, right? And then the sampling frame is a list of sampling units. Yeah. And then we're calling a sample here as being a collection of sampling units drawn from a sampling frame. If this is making sense. Hopefully you're able to relate to some of these things you're doing in your respective projects, is it? I guess the parameter is nothing more than a numeric characteristic of the population. So things like your age, for instance, right? Date of birth or something like that. Well, age can be derived from date of birth, but maybe your gender, for instance, right? You know, and then your statistic is like a numeric characteristic of the sample itself. Hopefully this is making sense here, right? Is this making sense? Are you able to identify these different aspects here relative to what we've discussed? Are you still there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, you know, sometimes some of these things will pop up here, and maybe it would be a lot easier if we use an example here, like this same example we're looking at, right? University of Zambia students. So we are calling a sampling frame here as a complete list or source from which a sample is drawn, right? So students, if studying, if you're looking at University of Zambia students here, what we'll be saying would be a sampling frame here are people that are fully registered. You understand? University of Zambia students will have people that are registered or not, right? So our frame, our sampling frame will be students that have registered. Right? And so we see here that the sample itself, sampling frame is like you're specifying your boundaries, is it? Right? How you're going to draw the sample. When you do draw the sample itself, so out of those that are registered, maybe we're going to draw out 1,000. The 1,000 is our sample, right? And then what we're calling as the some things that students normally grapple with here, what we are calling as our sampling unit here would be well, it's like individual elements that you'd be selecting for inclusion in the sample, right? And really, the definition here could, in part, depend on the parameters that you're utilizing. I want to draw attention to the study that was conducted, the PrEP study. They said that they were interested in people that were below a certain age and all those things, right? Anyway, so it depends. I mean, in essence, though, for our example here, the sampling unit would be the individuals, because we're basing our inclusion on the individual itself. In some instances, the sampling unit, like the Zambia Demographic Household Survey, the sampling unit could be the household, is it, not the individual, right? So you're looking at a typical household or something like that. Imagine you are conducting a study that is done by JCTR, but you don't want to do what JCTR does. Maybe you'd be saying our sampling unit is going to be a household that comprises of 5 individuals, something, some weird thing like that, you know. Anyways, hope this is making sense. So again, the parameter itself is a numerical characteristic, right? I gave an example here, gender, age, for instance. And then the statistic is a calculation of the parameter itself, is it? So you could say 50% or 60% of participants were female, something like that, right? So statistics are computed based on parameters, in essence. Anyways, hope this is kind of like making sense. Again, just our visual representation. You have an entire population, students at the University of Zambia, right? Your target is those that are registered. From those that are registered, you collect your sample or something, you know. And so within there is where you have your case or your elements. Now, the question that we ought to ask here is, now that we have all this background information, it's like, how exactly do we select, right, the people that are going to comprise our sample? You know, it turns out that there are 2 primary, methods that are used to select subset of individuals from a larger population, and this decision is based on randomness, right, on probabilities, if you will. So there's what we call probability sampling and non-probability sampling. And what you notice to the far right here is a diagram that showcases the categorization of these different sampling techniques. So going forward, what we're going to do is, as we're continuing tomorrow, is we're going to look at these specific methods, right? Sampling, these are called sampling techniques, right? Specific methods, there are pros and cons, and perhaps instances where you may you may need to select instances where you may need to decide on a particular sampling technique. But anyway, so maybe before we start our discussion of the actual sampling techniques here, just to make a distinction between probability sampling and non-probability sampling here. Probability sampling is, techniques where each and every element of the population has a known and non-zero chance of being selected. It's like if I wanted to conduct a study with you, right? I would sample you in such a way. One of the approaches is I sample you in such a way that each and every one of you has an equal chance of being selected. So it's like, I don't care who, I just want to interview 10 of you maybe. I'm just being hypothetical here. I just want to interview 10 of you. It's probability. It's going to be probability sampling if I don't really care who exactly I'm going to be interacting with. Okay. However, the alternative approach is such that there's some sort of bias, right, in the selection itself. So maybe instead of randomly selecting or ensuring that each and every one of you has an equal chance of being selected, it's like flipping a coin or something. Maybe what I may decide to do is I may decide to be very careful in terms of who I would want to include in my study. Maybe my criteria would be such that I just want to restrict myself to those people that have attended at least 5 sessions in the last month or something like that, right? Or I could say, because I'm conducting this study in the morning, I'm going to conduct it in such a way that it uses convenience sampling, right? Those that will be available for class tomorrow. Not everybody shows up for class in the morning. So the difference lies in the randomness, right? In probability sampling, everybody has an equal chance of being, each element or case has an equal chance of being selected to be a part of the sample. Whereas in non-probability sampling here, you're not basing it on randomness, is it? You're being careful in terms of how you're selecting or how you're sampling, in essence. Yeah. So really, the procedure that you follow when you're sampling is as follows, right? First of all, identify your sampling frame. Again, we said it's based on typically judgment. You identify your sampling frame. All students enrolled into LIS 2034 in the 2024/25 academic year. And then you decide, yeah, I'll ask you to mute your microphone, wherever you are, Mr. Vincent. Yeah, that's not nice, is it? I don't know what's happening with this character called Vincent. Yeah. And, the unfortunate thing here is even having trouble. I don't know, this character here. Somebody call Vincent and tell him to mute his microphone or something is just disturbing us. I don't know, my browser is not responding here. Oh, there we go. I can mute him now. I want to check him out. Mute him. So you decide the suitable sample size. Right. So first, identify a sampling frame, is it? It's like all students enrolled into LIS 2034, okay? But LIS 2034 has close to about 130 students, right? So your population is like 130 plus, right? So the next step is you decide out of the 130, right? How many are you going to sample? Now the how many depends on the measurement instrument. Is it interviews? Is it a questionnaire, right? So maybe if it's a questionnaire, you're going to say we're interested in working with our sample size is, I'm being hypothetical here, 50 participants, right? That's the second stage. The third stage is you select the appropriate technique to sample. So out of 130, you say, I'm going to sample 50. But the question is, how are you selecting these 50? Are you going to randomly select them, right? Are you going to stratify them such that you have a mix of both genders, male and female? Are you going to have to stratify them such that you have equal representation from different minors or the different programs, right? So that's step number 3, select the appropriate technique, right? Sampling technique. And then finally, you confirm, we check that the sample is representative enough. That's it. So it's a 4-step process, really, or 4-stage process. Now, some things to consider here before we start our detailed discussion of these different sort of sampling techniques here is factors to consider when identifying a sampling frame is the problem that you encounter making use of these databases that will comprise of potential participants, for instance, right? That may influence whether or not you're going to use random sampling or stratified sampling or snowball sampling. You know, sometimes you may not have access to details or information, right, to create these stratas, if you will. So factors like the extent of possible generalization from the sample, right? The goal ultimately is when you collect this data, you want to draw conclusions. Out of the 10 students I interviewed, Lighton apparently is not very effective or something, according to the interviews conducted. Question is, can we generalize those findings, right? Yeah, so you're looking at the extent towards which you can generalize your findings, which is why your sample has got to be representative. And also, more importantly, this notion of validity and reliability. To what extent can we trust the data that we've collected? And final, obviously, issues to do with ensuring that you're not biased in your selection. Now, I want to give away something here before I let you go. The fact that most of these non-probability sampling techniques will have some sort of biasness to them, especially a convenience sampling, is it? I'm just going to work with students that have been consistently attending classes, for instance. Mr. Vincent, I don't know why you're thinking. I think we can leave it at that. I wanted to find out if you have any specific questions. So far, when we meet tomorrow, we're going to continue our discussion of sampling. We'll discuss all these different sampling techniques so that you know exactly how to kind of like target these potential participants. Are there any questions or thoughts about this? If not, thank you very much. I will see you tomorrow at 7 promptly. Bye for now.